This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. And for an extra 10% off, use the code CFSPJ10 at checkout. Hello and welcome to the Equals to Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast, I'll be looking over the game against Bournemouth by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Luka and Milivojevic and Ruben Loftus-Cheek after the game. So let's begin. An excellent individual effort from Wilfried Zaha looked to have sealed the vulnerable 3 points for the Eagles, until once again Bournemouth scored a late goal to take a share of the spoils. 7 points separated both sides as the relegation running continues to be as tight as ever this season, and Roy Hodgson went into this one without the injured Christian Benteke, but did welcome back James Thompkins and Ruben Loftus-Cheek into the starting 11. The hosts had the perfect opportunity to take an early advantage as Charlie Daniels played the ball into the box and he found Callum Wilson, but the striker, who was left unmarked, wasn't able to connect in a way that he would have liked and the ball ran out of play. On 9 minutes, Palace had their first chance of the afternoon when Andros Townsend played the ball across goal, but Steve Cook just got in there ahead of Wilfried Zaha to put it out of play and give away the first corner of the afternoon. James Macarthur had the next opportunity to break the deadlock for the visitors. After a good spell of passing, he was the man with the ball at his feet, inside the box and a chance to shoot, which he did with his effort heading towards goal, but he saw it blocked by Nathan Ake. In a good first half of football between the two sides, the action was soon back at the other end of the field, and Palace were grateful for an excellent block by Wan-Bissaka on 37 minutes to deny Jermaine Defoe when the striker was in a good position in front of goal. In the added time of the opening period, Simon Francis' cross was well bet by Wilson, but his powerful header, as he got above his man, went wide of the target. Palace had the perfect start to the second half, as birthday boy Luka Milivojevic struck a perfect free kick from just outside the box on 47 minutes, after a foul on James Mccarthy. Milivojevic didn't stand a chance in the Bournemouth goal, as it was so well placed into the bottom corner of the net to give Hodgson's side a vital lead. Just minutes later at the other end of the pitch, Wayne Hennessy kept his side ahead. Milivojevic didn't stand a chance in the Bournemouth goal, as it was so well placed into the bottom corner of the net to give Hodgson's side a vital lead. Just minutes later at the other end of the pitch, Wayne Hennessy kept his side ahead with a fine save as he got down low to push away a shot from Lewis Cook, as the home side looked for an immediate response. Patrick Vanano had a great chance to extend the lead when he found himself in space and picked up the ball to run towards goal, but saw his shot saved by Begovic from close range. The home side pushed forward trying to get on level terms, and in turn left space at the back with a couple of chances falling to Zaha. On 59 minutes he saw a shot pushed away by Begovic, and then he had another chance when he was put in by Townsend, but also saw that effort blocked. The home side made Palace pay for their missed chances, when substitute Mousset made the most of his chance just 2 minutes after coming on, as he put the opportunity away past Wayne Hennessy to bring the scores level. Hodgson's side soon regained the advantage when Zaha showed his brilliance by getting the better of his man with an excellent turn on the edge of the box, and then firing the ball into the roof of the net with a superb left foot finish, which Begovic could do nothing about with 15 minutes remaining. With 6 minutes remaining, Fraser got the better of his man and drove the ball into the box, but Cabaye made a terrific tackle to cut out the danger. The home side were back on level terms though with 2 minutes remaining, as another sub, Joshua King, scored yet another late goal for the Cherries this season, as he got the ball over the line at the far post. Despite 2 excellent goals from the visitors, it was only a share of the points for Hodgson's side on their trip to the south coast, despite leading twice against Eddie Howe's side. There was more frustration for Crystal Palace as they conceded late on against A.F.C. Bournemouth on Saturday in a 2-2 draw. The Eagles led twice on the south coast, but goals from Luka Milivojevic and Wilfried Zaha were cancelled out by Mousset and King, with the Cherries netting in the 89th minute to deny the Eagles victory. But what did we learn from the game? Here are 5 things. Number 1. More late drama. Late goals have become a common theme for both sides in recent weeks, albeit at different ends. Bournemouth have earned themselves the comeback king's tag after turning matches around and salvaging points from losing positions, while Palace have lost out to Tottenham, Manchester United and Liverpool as a result of late goals. And the trends continued here at the Vitality Stadium, with Joshua King netting the goal to deny Palace victory in the 89th minute. It was the 7th game in a row involving Bournemouth where a goal had been scored in the 89th minute or later. Number 2. Double delight for Palace ace. Crystal Palace star Luka Milivojevic was celebrating his 27th birthday, and he marked the occasion with the opening goal. His stunning free kick made it 10 goals for the season for the Serbian, making him the first Palace midfielder to reach double figures in goals in a Premier League season. This was also a 3rd goal in his last 3 games, and his 8th from set pieces this season, 7 penalties. And 45.5% of Palace's goals this season have been scored from set pieces, a league high. Number 3. You can't keep Zaha down. For the majority of the game, Wilfried Zaha was shackled by the disciplined efforts of Bournemouth's defence. Indeed, in the first half, he was very quiet by his standards, and at times he cut a frustrated figure as the Cherries doubled up on him, with his frustration threatening to boil over on an occasion, including a flashpoint with Lewis Cook. But once again, he proved that you cannot keep a player of his quality out of the game, with his solo effort to put Palace back in front worthy of winning any game. Unfortunately for him and for Palace, it wasn't enough to help the visitors get all 3 points, as Josh King had the final say in the 89th minute. Number 4. Missed chances cost Palace dear. Having taken the lead, Crystal Palace had 2 golden chances to make it 2-0 and potentially put the game to bed. Bournemouth goalkeeper Asmir Begovic ensured that didn't happen as he made 2 fine saves to deny Patrick Fernando and Zaha, leading to praise from Cherries boss Eddie Howe. Fernando's opportunity was the better of them, being a 1-on-1 with the Bosnian goalkeeper, but he couldn't find a way past the former Chelsea man. And Palace paid the price for their wastefulness as Bournemouth twice came back to claim a point. And number 5. No forward, no problem. Not for the first time this season, Crystal Palace lined up without a recognised centre forward in the side due to the injury to Christian Benteke. He missed out with a groin injury, with Zaha and Andros Townsend lining up as a front 2, as they did on an occasion earlier on in the season when Benteke was out injured. And their partnership up top helped to cause plenty of problems for the Bournemouth back line, with their pace and ability to take on defenders stretching the host and creating space for others to exploit. Unfortunately for Palace, they didn't always choose the right option when well placed, but they did have 13 shots on goal, including 6 on target. So I'm now going to move on to the player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for the latest Palace news. And also, if you're on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group, which is a really great place to join in with discussions and also share your opinions with other fans. And much like a forum, it's a great place to upload any videos, photos and any news articles you've found online that you want to share with other Palace fans. Then of course the Facebook group is the place to do so. So like I said there in that small introduction, if you do want a place to get all the latest Palace news where we regularly update it with all the latest transfer news and just general news about the club, as well as giving match updates, if you do want to, have that, then of course do follow us on both on Twitter and Facebook page at Crystal Palace. But also, if you're on Facebook, don't just follow the Facebook page, but also do join the Facebook group, because we not only post news articles in there, but also it's a great place for you guys to get involved, where you can have your own discussions with other fans and also just post your own opinion on there, post your own videos and photos. So anything you do want to share with other Palace fans, then of course do join the Facebook group, because it gives you that platform to do so. Now, another great place to share your opinion is in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, rating the players' performances from 1 to 10. And whether you're a Bournemouth fan or a Palace fan, do comment below with your views, not only of the players' performances, but even if you don't want to do player ratings, do comment below with your general views of the game. And the only reason I want you to do that is so that not only I can come back to the video and see, it's so that I can come back to the video and see what the listeners thought, but also any other fans, whether they're Palace or Bournemouth, who come to the video, they can not only listen to my views in the podcast, but they can also read the comment section and see what other fans thought about the game generally. So if you are someone who likes to get involved and likes to have your opinion heard, but also likes to read others, then do of course feel free to drop your views of the game below. And some other points in terms of a Palace perspective could be another late goal. Why do you think we keep conceding late goals? And obviously what you think should be done in order to stop us conceding late goals. And I'm sure that actually making a substitute may help with that. And in terms of the point, whether you do think that actually coming into the game, we thought that a point would have been a fair result, but actually in the context of things, actually a point is a bad result, when actually we probably could have gone on to get all 3. if we had taken our chances and hadn't conceded a late goal. So them 2 points there are things that I'm going to discuss later on in the podcast. So do also feel free to share your views of them 2 points below. Now, if you don't want to join any of these social media pages or join the Facebook group, then do check all links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, starting in goal with Wayne Hennessy, who I'm going to give a 6. Made a couple of good saves to deny Mark Pugh and Lewis Cook. So Wayne Hennessy here, I've given him a 6, and much like his performances have been recently, he's rarely been troubled by the opposition, basically meaning he's had a pretty quiet game, and he's only really had to make 1 or 2 saves here and there, and that was the case here against Bournemouth. Now, it wasn't the fact that Bournemouth were playing terribly, because in the first minute they already had 2 chances on goal, and both the strikers fluffed them, so it wasn't like Bournemouth weren't creating any chances, it's just the fact they weren't really taking their chances other than the goals really well. So in terms of Hennessy's performance, because Bournemouth, much like Palace, we weren't taking our chances, it was really pretty easy for Hennessy in the game. He didn't really have any major saves to make, but there were 2 saves in particular which were absolutely outstanding. Now, of course, many people would say that that's your standard goalkeeping save. Any good goalkeeper should be making that save, but we all know with Hennessy he's a scapegoat, and you know, he isn't the best goalkeeper, but he's still a decent Premier League goalkeeper, so it's still a great save for him to make. You know, people would say that that's the save that De Gea makes, and that's just a normal save. But in terms of Hennessy, whenever he makes a save like that, it's quite important and it keeps us in the game. So although people like using Hennessy as a scapegoat and basically saying that that's a standard save, actually Wayne Hennessy, he's always criticised for stuff like that. So when he does make a save, we're of course going to give him praise for that. But the saves from Mark Pugh and Lewis Cook, obviously, I talked about Bournemouth not having any major good chances, but these were 2 good chances from Bournemouth, you know, hitting the ball. I think one was cutting inside from outside the box and one was inside the box. 2 great saves, and obviously Hennessy saw the ball going into the far corner, so he managed to dive, stretch and get the ball away. So most people would say, yes, that's a standard goalkeeping save, but the fact that Hennessy was able to get down low and make the save was fantastic to see as well. And, you know, in terms of his overall performance, you know, in terms of distribution, that was alright in the game. You know, we know that we're not playing with Benteke, so there's no point putting long balls up the field, but I still thought his distribution was alright. And in terms of playing it out from the back, you know, we had Mamadou Sakho, James Thompkins in front of him, so actually just pass the ball to them and they can play it out from the back. So overall, not only just take the saves away, if you put them aside, actually his overall performance in terms of playing the ball and actually communicating with the back four, that was overall really good as well. But overall, you know, I've given him a 6, you know, obviously made them 2 very decent saves down low, obviously to keep the hosts at bay and keep it at 0-0 at half time. But also what you've got to consider is it's just an overall good performance from him. You know, nothing outstanding, no fantastic saves or fantastic, you know, lofted balls forward. But I still thought it was quite an average performance from him and well deserving of the 6. But do comment below with your thoughts about Wayne Hennessy's performance, and do also comment below, I've seen a lot of debate on Twitter, whether you do think that actually that's a standard goalkeeping save that every goalkeeper should be making, or whether you do actually think that actually it was actually a pretty decent save from Hennessy and people need to cut him a bit of slack. So do comment below with your views of that. But Wayne Hennessy here, a 6 for him. Now to move on to the right back, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who I'm going to give a 7. Another fine display from the fullback, who made a superb block tackle to deny Jermaine Defoe and get forward when possible. So Aaron Wan-Bissaka here, I've given him a 7, and much like his performances have been since he's made his Premier League debut, he's been getting better and better as the games have gone on. But in the last sort of 2-3 games, we've seen little glimpses of rookie errors from him, and in this game here, obviously conceding a late goal, he was obviously caught ball watching and made it really easy for Josh King to score that goal late in the game. So in terms of that, his performances have been great recently, but we've started to see little glimpses of little rookie mistakes here. But because he's only 20 years old, he's only going to get better the more he plays, and hopefully the more he does learn from that. But in terms of his overall performance, if you put that aside, the fact that he made a little bit of a mistake, I thought his overall performance was just as good as his have been in the past few weeks. You know, I thought the tackle or the block tackle he made to deny Jermaine Defoe was fantastic. You know, he always scores against Palace, and this is the first game in quite a long time that Jermaine Defoe hasn't scored against us, which I suppose is a good thing. You know, the fact that Wan-Bissaka, unlike Tim Fosu-Mensah, when Wan-Bissaka actually dives in, 90% of the time he actually gets a challenge, whereas Fosu-Mensah sort of recklessly just tries and dives into challenges. So it's great to see that actually Wan-Bissaka could not only make a challenge with a sliding block tackle, but also he can actually make it accurate and get the ball off a poacher striker such as Jermaine Defoe. So that was great in terms of stopping him. And in terms of getting forward, you know, I know his crosses haven't been fantastic in recent games, but the fact that he got forward as much as possible in this game here was actually quite beneficial. You know, we've got the likes of Zaha and Townsend who were playing up front, but quite often they drifted out wide, so they needed support. So the fullbacks in Van Aanholt and Wan-Bissaka provided that sort of support going forward, and also the likes of Loftus-Cheek and Macarthur did actually, battle up well and sort of go well together and partner well with the likes of Wan-Bissaka, because obviously he's given them that support going forward. So not only was he doing his defensive job in terms of making a fantastic block to deny Jermaine Defoe, but also actually going forward he was linking well with the front four players, and actually was quite, not, I wouldn't say crucial in terms of all of our attacking chances, but certainly when we were playing it out from the back, picking up the ball from an attack by Bournemouth, certainly Wan-Bissaka was one of the most important players there in terms of getting the ball to the front four players. But in terms of his overall play, yes, you could say I should give him a 6 because he made that rookie error, which of course, he was ball watching and let King just get an easy shot on goal, and obviously that was the equaliser in the 89th minute. But actually, for the majority of the game, I thought he worked really hard. And, if you put that rocking mistake aside, I thought he had a really great performance. And it wasn't just that tackle against Jermaine Defoe, because throughout the game, he was consistently very good defensively, like I've said, until he made that mistake. So for me, really, if you put that mistake aside, he arguably could have been one of the nominations for the Man of the Match award, because I do think his performance was up there with one of the best players on the field. But once again, as we've seen in the last sort of 2 or 3 games, there's slight little bits of, I suppose you could say, rookie errors or inexperience sort of popping into this game here, because I'm sure that as he plays more games, these sort of errors will come out. And if he can perform as well as he did in this game, and he cuts out all of the errors we've started to see in the last few games, he's going to turn out to be a fantastic player. But like I've said already, a 7 for him, a really good performance here. And the more he plays, which is looking more and more likely this season, the more he plays, the better he's going to get. So hopefully, with him being given a chance now and him taking his chance, hopefully he can develop into an even better player. But Aaron Wan-Bissaka here, a 7 for him. Now to move on to the centre-back, James Thompkins, who I'm going to give a 7. Assured again on his return to the side, with some no-nonsense defending and composure on the ball. So James Thompkins here, I've given him a 7, and much like what I always say about Thompkins, he's one of our most consistent players in the side. And once again here, put in another solid defensive performance, and realistically, he wasn't really at blame for the goals we conceded, so realistically, you could say that actually overall he had a really solid defensive performance. But obviously last weekend we had Kelly and Saka at the back, so it was nice to see Thompkins come back into the side. Obviously had a slight injury that he picked up on the Thursday, so he couldn't play last weekend against Liverpool, which really for me it was quite a miss, because we could have done with his physicality against Liverpool. But overall, coming back into the side here, didn't look out of place, and much like what he's been doing throughout the whole of this season, putting in fantastic performances. And the thing I really like about his performance, and this is something that's consistent throughout the whole season, but especially in this game, is just that no-nonsense defending. So the fact that whenever the ball comes into the area, rather than him just trying to mess around and try and pass it out the back, he just clears the danger, gets rid of it. So in that respect, actually, we just get rid of all the danger and make sure that no mistakes can come from that. So the fact that he's got this no-nonsense approach where he just gets rid of the ball if there's danger, or so that will be either clearing it or headering it away, whatever it is, that sort of approach to the game is really great. But also, at times where there's no danger, he was very composed on the ball as well. So something that both Saka and Thompkins bring to the side is actually that ball playing ability from centre back. And I do think that James Thompkins coming back into the side gave us something that we were missing against Liverpool. The likes of Kelly, who's not really fantastic at doing that. So Thompkins came back into the side and gave us that composure on the ball. And quite a lot of the time, he was passing the ball out from the back and actually proved to be quite an outlet for us in terms of getting the ball from the fence to the midfield to the attackers. So that sort of approach to the game in terms of getting the ball from one place to the other as well, I thought that worked really well. So even though his primary job is to defend, he's still actually pretty good in terms of starting up all of the team's attacks. Now obviously, the whole team defensively in the first sort of 10 minutes looked a bit shaky, and you can understand that. Thompkins and Saka haven't played, obviously they've been chopping and changing defensive partners, but obviously they didn't play last weekend, and obviously we wasn't sure whether Thompkins would return, so presumably he only was deemed fit on Thursday, the training session there, or even the training session on Friday. So realistically, Saka probably didn't know who he was playing alongside, so obviously you can understand them being a little bit shaky, not knowing who they were originally going to partner. But as soon as they settled into the game, I thought they once again, like we've seen this season and last season, they formed once again a fantastic, solid partnership at the back. And like I've said already, that's slightly shaky start. If you put that aside for the first sort of 10 minutes or so, a fantastic performance followed after that. Now, of course, I said that James Thompkins wasn't necessarily directly involved in any of the goals we conceded. There was a poor clearance from himself, which led to Bournemouth's first goal. You know, I'm not going to take anything away from it, because unlike the second goal where Wan-Bissaka lost his man, this one was a fantastic curling finish into the bottom corner. I can't really take anything away from the player, but realistically, we should have done better with that clearance, because I talked about Thompkins' no-nonsense approach to defending, and in this game he'd done that, except for that point where he didn't just put enough power on that clearance to get it further enough away. Obviously, Bournemouth picked up on the edge of the area. Lovely, you know, like I said, lovely shot from outside the box, curling into the bottom corner. Personally, for me, obviously, it would have been better if some players, like, say, for example, Luka Milivojevic or James Macarthur or Cabaye, the players who are meant to be shielding the back four, it would have been better for them to try and actually stop the ball, get into him and just close him down. But also, I've seen a few people blame Hennessy, but personally for me, the fact that the curvature on the ball and how low it was to the ground, I think it's really difficult to save that one. So not really, I'm not going to put any blame or that goal in particular on any particular player, but certainly could say that actually James Thompkins had a good performance. But if I had to pick out one bad thing about his game, it would be that poor clearance, which obviously led to Bournemouth's goal. But James Thompkins here, overall a 7 for him. Another fantastic performance, you know, from Thompkins. He's up there with one of the players of the season for me. You know, we've got the likes of Thompkins, Zaha, Milivojevic, maybe Townsend to an extent. So we've got 4 players who are probably up there for, you know, Player of the Season award. But certainly James Thompkins, by putting in consistently fantastic performances, he's got to be up there for me. And, you know, he may not necessarily get my vote, obviously, unless he puts in absolute fantastic performances, even better than the likes of Wilf and Milivojevic towards the end of the season. He may not necessarily get my vote, but he's certainly up there with one of the high contenders for the Player of the Season award. But James Thompkins here, a 7 for him. Another assured display, lots of tackles, lots of blocks, and personally for me, great composure on the ball. So really for me, a 7 for him. Can't really blame him for any of the goals we conceded. Now to move on to the centre-back, Mamadou Sakho, who I'm going to give a 6. Like Palace, he grew into the game after a slow start. So much like what I mentioned there with the performance of James Thompkins, it was a very slow start from Mamadou Sakho, and whether that was because he hasn't played with James Thompkins in the training, you know, in the week up to this game, or whether it's just the fact that it was just a general slow start to the game, whatever it was, he obviously started the game really slow, made a few errors early on, a few sloppy bits of defending, and, you know, there was 2 chances within the first minute that Bournemouth had. If you put that aside, after that he grew into the game, and actually, much like the whole of the team, I think, because we were dominated quite a lot in that first sort of period of the first half. After that, I think, much like the whole team, he grew into the game and actually went on to have a pretty solid performance. You know, there were a few sort of moments where he lost his concentration, but other than that, I think his overall performance was really good. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of debate recently as to whether the injuries have tarnished him, because before he had all the injuries, he you know, the end of last season, the few he's had this season, before that he was playing really well, and when he came back from the one in the summer, he played really well then. He's got another few injuries here, and it's, you know, it's starting to affect his performances maybe, because he doesn't actually look like he's the player that we had on loan at the end of last season. But I don't know whether that's just because he's just come back from an injury, or whether it's actually the fact that maybe the injuries have had an impact on him. Whatever it is, his performances are not quite up there with how good they were this season at the beginning, and obviously the end of last season. So whether that's because of his injuries, or whether that's just the fact that he's coming back to full fitness, whatever it is, he's not quite performing to the standards that we know he's capable of, because we know he's a fantastic defender on his day. We just haven't seen that in the last few games. But once again here, you know, in this game here, like I said, he had a slow start to the game. I thought that was quite a few moments, especially in that first period, where he lost his concentration quite easily. So there was one in particular where Defoe got a chance within the first minute, ball over the top, and Mamadou Sakho, rather than watching his man in Defoe who's running through on goal, he's caught ball watching again. And obviously, unluckily for us, Defoe fluffs his chance. But that just shows that actually a little bit of lack of concentration could cost us, but luckily on that occasion it didn't. And obviously he needs to step up his game, because you've got someone like James Thompkins who's also had his fair amount of injuries like Sakho, but actually he's still managed to remain quite consistent and actually be that rock in the defence. So what we need to see now is from Mamadou Sakho, especially against Brighton, the massive game coming up this weekend, we need to see him up his game slightly, not because he's playing bad, just so he can get back to that really, really high standard he set the end of last season, beginning of this season. And think about it, if you've got someone like Thompkins who's playing as well as he is, and you put someone like Saka who's also a fantastic player, that just gives you a really solid base to play from. And you know, when you consider the skills that Zaha, Townsend have up front, and we've got Loftus-Cheek back, if we can have a solid base so they don't have to worry about defending, if we can just leave these two players in, Saka and Thompkins, to defend, let the forward players do what they do, then hopefully they'll create more chances, and because we're solid at the back, we don't necessarily have to worry too much. But Mamadou Sakho here, I've given him a 6 as opposed to a 7, and that's mainly because of his poor start to the game where he was quite slow, but also the fact that unlike Thompkins, where Thompkins was making quite a few important, robust challenges, tackles and blocks, I didn't see that a lot from Sakho, but I still did see a few things from his performance which I think do warrant a 6, and especially his ball playing ability from the back. That was quite good in this game, so that was one of the things that helped us going forward. The fact that Sakho, rather than just lumping the ball long, he'd actually try and play it out from the back. So Mamadou Sakho here, a 6 for him. Had quite a slow start to the game, didn't really show up as to the standards we expect from him, but much like the whole team, he slowly grew into the game, had a few good defensive contributions there, but certainly for the games coming up, he needs to up his game back to the standards we know he's capable of. So Mamadou Sakho here, a 6 for him. Now to move on to the left back, Patrick Van Aanholt, who I am going to give a 6. Going to some advanced positions with some marauding runs on the fullback, but really should have made it 2-0 when through 1-on-1, only to be denied by Asmir Begovic. So Patrick Van Aanholt here, I've given him a 6, and much like his performances have been over the last month or so, he's actually been probably one of our most consistent players, bar the likes of Milivojevic and Thompkins, and actually with the goals he scored and with his defensive contribution and also with his offensive contribution, he's actually been one of our key players in the last few games. But in terms of this game here against Bournemouth, he wasn't as great as he has been in recent games, but he still had quite a good impact on the side. Some of the things I liked about his performance here was the amount of times he found himself in advanced positions. Now, of course, he was playing on the left-hand side, but there was one chance in particular where he was actually on the right hand side of the pitch and made a fantastic marauding run through the middle, got onto the end of the ball, and that was a fantastic chance. So he's not only obviously being good defensively in terms of not making as many mistakes or ball watching like he has been doing at the beginning of the season, but actually he's now starting to up his defensive performance and actually prove to be an offensive asset, not only obviously on the left hand side, but when from corners and set pieces and things like that, actually he can show that actually he can play on another side of the pitch and actually still have as good of chances. Now the chance I was talking about was one when it was 1-0 to Palace. Fantastic ball out to Zaha. Zaha's put an absolutely fantastic crossfield pass to Van Aanholt, absolutely pinpoint. He's through one-on-one with the goalkeeper. It probably would have been easier for him to dink it, but I think because he was so close, it probably wouldn't have worked. And personally for me, I think it would have been better to, obviously as Begovic was going to ground, try and just take the ball around him and score like that. But instead, he's hit it straight at him, put loads of power on it, which is fine, and he put the accuracy, so it would have gone into the goal if the goalkeeper wasn't there. But obviously, Asmir Begovic made himself big and made a save. And I must especially mention to him, I talked about Hennessy making a few good saves. Asmir Begovic was probably up there as well because he made quite a few important saves as well. So obviously, Van Aanholt had an alright defensive performance, but that chance offensively was absolutely fantastic. And normally, he would score that. We saw against Chelsea, we've seen against other clubs that he could actually score goals like that. But obviously here, against Bournemouth, didn't quite have the same thing. He obviously had a fantastic chance from that through ball from Wilfried Zaha, didn't quite make the most of it. Yes, he got the touch alright and he made the run perfect, but he obviously couldn't quite get it past Asmir Begovic. But personally for me, I know I've seen a lot of people blame him a lot for that, but personally for me, I think it's quite a difficult situation. You've got the ball through one-on-one, the goalkeeper's in front of you, so you either dink it, which Asmir Begovic is quite a tall goalkeeper with quite a big reach, so he might have been able to reach up and get it, or you take it around the goalkeeper, which personally for me, it sounds easier than it looks, but he could have done that. But at the end of the day, we've got to look at the positives from that. So the fact that Wilfried Zaha put in an absolutely fantastic ball, and the fact that Van Aanholt was able to run onto that. So although we didn't score from it, and it's quite disappointing because that went on to punish us because we missed that chance, actually you've got to look at the positives and actually say that actually we're actually creating quite a lot of good offensive chances and quite a few good bits of play to get chances in front of goal, which of course you've got to take as a positive. But overall, I think it was a really decent performance from the international. Obviously, he played a few international games recently, done really well. So once again, his performances over the last few months, and you could definitely say in the last few weeks where he's actually been fantastic, you could say that actually he's warranted him getting into the international team, and certainly his performances have been getting better and better. So he's now putting in good performances for Palace and hopefully is a key player in terms of helping us stay up, but also he's now getting the recognition for these performances from the Dutch international team. But like I've said already, although he got into loads of advanced positions and had that chance which he probably should have scored, I think his overall defensive performance was fantastic. But the reason I've given him a 6 as opposed to a 7, which is his offensive and defensive performance probably would have warranted, is just the fact that he should have done better with that one-on-one chance with Milivojevic. Because really for me, I know it's easier for us to say that he should score it, but looking back at it, yes, it's difficult, but certainly a professional footballer should be doing better there, whether that's to dink it over him or take it around him. You know, that's for him to decide. But Patrick Van Aanholt here, a 6 for him. Good defensive, good offensive performance, but really should have done better with that one-on-one with Milivojevic. Now to move on to the captain and midfielder, Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give an 8. Anchored in midfield superbly and netted his 10th goal of the season with a scrumptious free kick early on in the second half. So Luka Milivojevic here, before I go on to talk about his performance and the reason I've given him an 8, got to say happy birthday to him. His birthday was on Saturday during the game, and he topped off his birthday with a fantastic goal for Palace, taking him to 10 for the season, but also with another fantastic performance in the midfield. Now in terms of what he did in the game, the main thing I've given him the 8 for is we know that he's really good at shielding the back four, and he sort of plugs that gap between the midfield and defence. He done that superbly here against Bournemouth. You know, his defensive performance, loads of tackles, loads of blocks, and just bossing that midfield battle was fantastic in the game. But the thing that I liked is the fact that he anchored the midfield superbly. So he was the guy who held the midfield together. He was the guy who was making things happen in the midfield, and that was the thing I liked about his performance. You know, he done that superbly, and that is one of the main reasons he had such a good performance, is the fact that he obviously anchored the midfield so well. And because of how good his performance was, him and Wilfried Zaha got put in the BBC's team of the week, which really just shows how good Luka's performance was here. But obviously the main reason I've given him the 8, obviously if you put his defensive performance aside, that was fantastic, but the goal he scored was absolutely phenomenal. You know, we just come out from the second half, we were quite lacklustre in the first half, so we went all guns blazing, got a free kick on the edge of the area, just off centre to the right, and Luka's absolutely pelted it into the bottom corner, lovely curl on it to get it above the wall and into the goal. He positioned it so far in the corner that Begovic had no chance, so it was just an absolutely scrumptious free kick. And you know, the fact that we were 1-0 up within the first, I think it was the 2 minutes of the second half, that obviously gave us a little bit more stead and a little bit more momentum in that half of football. And like I've said, as soon as we scored that one, a few moments later Van Aanholt had his chance, so it just shows actually how one chance and one goal can change the whole momentum of the game. And if Van Aanholt had taken that goal, it would have just been proof of how one goal can help propel you through the game. But personally for me, Luka anchored the midfield superbly and obviously scored that fantastic free kick. But the thing is, the thing I've got to talk about really is, you know, we know how good he is, and we know how good he was last season, and how since being given the captain he's stepped up and he's been absolutely fantastic, and he's up there with one of the players of the season. He's now going to be one of Hodgson's, you know, first names on the team sheet by now, because it's not only because he's the captain, so obviously your captain goes on first, and the fact that he leads the side so well is why he's the captain, but also the fact that how good he is defensively. It's almost certain now that he's probably, bar Wilfried Zaha, he's our best player. No one can deny it. I personally think that he's one of our best players, and you know, we know that he's been fantastic in recent weeks, and we know that actually it was his birthday, so he topped off his fantastic performances in recent weeks and obviously his birthday by scoring that picturesque free kick, obviously to put Palace ahead. Unluckily for us, we couldn't hold on to our lead twice, and we went on to draw the game. But it just shows actually how important a free kick from Luka can be in terms of getting us into the game. But what I've got to say is, you know, the last 3 games, so we're looking at Huddersfield, Liverpool, and of course Bournemouth at the weekend. Luka scored in the last three games, and I can't remember a player to score in 3 consecutive Premier League games in the Premier, since we've been promoted. I can't remember any players. Maybe there was. Do correct me in the comments below. But it's absolutely fantastic the fact that he's obviously scored this many goals in his last few games, and I think it's maybe I don't know, in his last 8 games he's scored or been involved in the goal in about 7 of them. So just showing once again how important he is to us. But I do think I might have made up that second stat, but I'm sure in the last sort of 9 games he's been involved in quite a lot of goals, so just showing once again how superb his performances are. But Luka Milivojevic here, absolutely outstanding again and fully deserving of the 8. The way he anchors the midfield and actually just protects the back 4 and obviously gives support to the main midfield, you know, his tackles, his blocks, absolutely outstanding in this game. and the fact that he can pelter in a free kick into the top corner is fantastic. But it does beg the question, why hasn't he been taking all of the free kicks this season? Because although we've seen Van Aanholt and Cabaye have a few free kicks saved this season, when you've got someone like Luka who scored one in pre-season, has absolutely banged one here against Bournemouth, it does beg the question why he hasn't been taking ones from similar positions all this season, because he showed once again that actually he is pretty good at free kicks. And certainly I hope now that Hodgson's seen that, and not only is putting him on penalty duty, but also putting him on free kick duty, because he's showing once again how much of a good player he is. But Luka Milivojevic here, another fantastic performance from the captain, and fully deserving the 8. So whilst I was editing this podcast, I did come across and I did double check that stat about Luka, and obviously the one about scoring in 3 consecutive games was correct, but the one about being involved in, I think it was, I said 5-6 goals in the last 9 games was incorrect. What I meant to say is that actually he's been involved, or he's had 8 set piece goals this season, obviously 7 of them being the penalties and the one here against Bournemouth being the free kick. So obviously I do apologise for making that mistake, but what I meant to say is that actually he hasn't been involved in 8 goals in the last few games. It's actually the fact that of the goals he's scored this season, 8 of them have actually been from set pieces, with 7 of them being penalties. So once again, I just wanted to clear up that stat. But still, the fact that he's getting involved and he's scoring lots of goals from set pieces, once again just highlights how much of an important player he is for us. So I just thought I'd clear that up. Now to move on to Yohan Cabaye, who I'm going to give a 6. Neat and tidy in midfield for the most part, without producing a telling moment. So Yohan Cabaye here, I've given him a 6, and much like his performances have been recently, he's once again been one of our most consistent players in terms of always putting in good performances. Not necessarily outstanding performances, but putting in good enough performances for the side. And this was another example here where he wasn't necessarily fantastic and he weren't necessarily one of the most crucial players in the side, but he's still done his part to help the team's performance. Now in terms of the game here against Bournemouth, I thought he was very neat and tidy for the most part. If you look at the whole team for the first 10-20 minutes or so, we were quite sloppy, but if you put that aside, the rest of the game I thought all of the players played really well, and Cabaye in particular, I thought that he was very neat and tidy in the midfield, and that's something you want. I'd always talk about winning the midfield battle, and certainly Cabaye was one of the crucial players in terms of helping us to have control of the midfield, because if you do play neat and tidy, don't give the opposition chances to take the ball, then of course that gives you a greater foothold on the game. But obviously this is great in terms of being neat and tidy and having chances on the ball, but he didn't produce that telling moment, and that's why I've given him a 6 as opposed to a 7, because although he was neat and tidy and was very good at passing, if he had had one telling through ball or one fantastic lofted pass into the box, if he had one fantastic pass rather than just being good at overall passing, then maybe he would have got a higher rating, because I think his performance did deserve it, but just because he was lacking that sort of telling, that final moment, because of that, obviously that's why I've given him a 6. But in terms of his overall performance, much like Luka's got his role in terms of protecting the back four, I think that Cabaye, his sort of performance does contrast slightly to Luka's, but I still think he does quite a crucial job for Palace in our midfield. And the thing that's really important for us is he allows others to get forward. So whereas Luka's job is to protect the back four and the space between the midfield and the defence, Cabaye's job is sort of to link up to be in the midfield and actually link up the balls coming from the back. So when he gets the ball from the likes of Sacco and Thompkins, when he picked up the ball, it's about him actually allowing players to go forward. So he's sort of the architect of our attacks. It's not only just pass the ball and pump it up to Benteke or Wilf or Townsend. It's not just about pumping the balls long, but it's also about giving the ball to Cabaye, and he's the one that can create stuff for the team, because obviously each player has their role in the team, whereas Luka's is protect the back four, whereas Cabaye's is actually to be the architect and help others get forward. It's not necessarily the fact that he has to get forward and he has to score goals, it's just purely the fact that he's the one who has to create and help players to go forward. But like I've said quite a lot obviously in this introduction, but obviously quite a lot this season, I think his passing, his tackling and distribution was just top quality. It always has been, but especially in this game here against Bournemouth, I think, like I said already, his passing was good because it was neat and tidy. Tackling when he had to go back and defend alongside Luka, I thought he was good at that. But also the distribution, and that once again links back to his job within the side, not necessarily being an all-out defensive midfielder, but actually he's more of a centre mid now, where actually his distribution in terms of helping others to get forward is really important. Now I did touch on this final point last week about his new contract. Roy Hodgson came out and said that they're having negotiations to give him a new contract. Personally, for me, another good performance from him here. Yes, he probably deserved, not necessarily deserved to come off the pitch, but he weren't necessarily up to the standards he normally was being. He was looking quite sluggish towards the end of the game. He probably should have been taken off the bench. But even though his legs are they're going slowly, even though he's not the player that he once was, he still has an impact on the game, and I do think he still does warrant to get a new contract. So hopefully Steve Parish, Dougie Freeman, hopefully all of them guys can organise it and get him a new contract, because at the moment it's looking like there's sort of 10, I think it's 10, 11, 12 players who are free agents in the summer. Maybe some of them have already got contracts and they haven't announced it, but you know, there's quite a lot of players who are allowed to go free in the summer, so we need to try and tie down as many important players as possible, and certainly Cabaye is one of these players who, personally for me, if I was the manager, I would 100% want to give a new contract. So Yohan Cabaye here, another good performance from him, and another one in a step forward to get his new contract. Now to move on to James Macarthur, who I am going to give a 7. Was busy in the midfield and offered the threat when ghosting into goal. So James Mccarthy here, I've given him a 7, and much of the performance of Yohan Cabaye, you know, in that midfield partnership, I think that Macarthur had a pretty similar game in the fact that he was going forward and, you know, offering a threat in front of goal, but also he was going back and helping Luka with his defensive work, and for that, of course, that's great to see, and that's one of the main reasons I've given him a 7. But the thing that gives him a 7 as opposed to a 6 I gave Macarthur was just how busy he was in the field, and we know from how Macarthur plays and the way he performs, he's always a very industrious player, basically meaning he's everywhere on the field, he's always running. And actually, I think, obviously this is not official, I'm not sure of this, but I'm sure if you look at the stats, bar someone like Andrew Townsend, I'm sure James Macarthur runs the most of any player on the pitch, purely because of just how industrious he is and how much of an engine he is in the field because of how much he runs. Now, of course, in terms of this game here against Bournemouth, we had to win that midfield battle. Playing 4-4-2 against a 4-4-2 is very important to have control of the midfield, and although Macarthur was playing out wide for quite a lot of the game, I still thought he'd done a relatively good job in doing that. And actually, you know, like he always is, he was busy in the midfield doing what he could for the team, and even when he was playing out of position, he's still done a job for the team. Now, the thing that I liked about his performance, and the main reason I've given him a 6 as opposed to, or I've given him a 7 as opposed to a 6 which I gave to Cabaye, obviously when you consider their performances are quite similar, it's just the fact that Macarthur was more in offensive roles, and actually he found himself quite a lot of time ghosting into the box, so basically getting on the end of chances. So Wilfried Zaha, Loftus-Cheek, Townsend, they were putting balls into the box, and obviously Macarthur was one of these players who was ghosting into the box and getting on the end of these chances. And there was one in particular in the first half where he got into the box, had a shot, and it was blocked by Nathan Ake. So he's not only showing that actually in the midfield he can have an impact by being industrious and just having the control of that area of the field by just continuously running, but also when he gets into the box, he's obviously scored a few goals for Palace, but actually he's obviously can get into the box and, you know, get on the end of these chances, which is of course great to see. And that's the thing that sort of ups his performance from Cabaye's, because although Cabaye was very good with his passing, he didn't really have that killer pass, whereas Macarthur on the other hand, yes, he wasn't passing as much, but actually he was the one actually getting into the box and actually getting on the end of chances, which is of course what you want to see. Now, of course, we know how much of a powerhouse Macarthur is, and in this game here against Bournemouth, it was no different. He was everywhere on the field, and obviously, much like the case has been this season, it proved again in this game here how much of a crucial player he is and how important he is, purely because of just his style of play in terms of just being that powerhouse and controlling the midfield. And like I said already, he had that early chance to open scoring, couldn't quite find the net. But like I've said already, and I've mentioned this quite a lot, the fact that he's able to ghost inside the box and actually get on the end of chances is what you want to see from I suppose we could call him a box-to-box midfielder, but in this game, you know, if you put that aside from the other games where he's playing box-to-box role, actually in this side here, in this game here, he's playing more as a winger or sort of a wide midfield player, but I still thought he'd done a relatively good job. So James Macarthur here, a 7 for him, a very powerhouse style performance from him, much like what we always expect. And certainly, obviously he didn't get a goal on the day, but certainly he was one of the players who had quite a lot of chances to get through on goal. So James Macarthur here, offensive and defensive contribution in the game, an overall good performance. Now to move on to Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who I am going to give a 6. Looked a threat when going forward, but failed to make a telling contribution in and around the box. So Ruben Loftus-Cheek here, I do like to compare other players' performances, and if we're going to look at someone like Macarthur, I compared him to Cabaye, and now I'm going to compare Loftus-Cheek to Macarthur, because I thought they'd done quite a similar thing in the game in terms of helping us to win that midfield battle, and I certainly do think that Loftus-Cheek obviously offered us a threat going forward, But the thing that he did, or he didn't do in comparison to Macarthur, is have that sort of telling contribution, that sort of end product inside the box. And I talked about Macarthur in quite a lot of detail in terms of him ghosting into the box and getting on the end of chances, and that's something that gave Macarthur a 6, or gave him a 7 as opposed to a 6, and that's something I liked about his game, because he was not only busy but had chances. Whereas Loftus-Cheek, yes, he was busy and he looked a threat, but he failed to make that telling contribution. And whether that was in the box when he got the ball at his feet, rather than shooting, he took one touch too many, or rather than passing, you take another touch too many and then have a shot himself. So obviously he didn't quite have a contribution in the box, and of course outside and around the box, rather than trying to have a shot from outside the box, which he probably could do on his day, or just trying to find another player, he didn't quite make the right decision. So when you compare him to Macarthur, who I thought when he ghosted into the box was quite effective, on the other hand, Loftus-Cheek, he doesn't quite get a 7 purely because he lacked that sort of contribution in the game. And that's not to say his performance is bad, because I've given him a 6, but I do think he did lack that sort of end product in and outside the box. Now, of course, coming back from injury, we thought he'd be a really important player. He was fantastic at the beginning of the season, got injured, had a few injuries, come back, been great. He's had this long injury now, he's just come back, and he hasn't sort of made the impact we would have liked and we would have expected from him coming back from injury. But I suppose if you're looking at it in my perspective, I'm like, well, you can understand he's come back from a long injury, you've got to give him time to get back into the gist of things. And it's not that his performances have been bad, it's just that he hasn't made the impact and he hasn't been as good as he has been, or he had been, before he got injured. But to be honest, when you look at the performance here, yes, he didn't make that much impact as you would have liked, and as we saw at the beginning of the season, this is the sort of game where actually, if you let him roll, he can actually show his best ability. But he didn't quite do that here, and maybe that was because he was playing out wide against the Cherries here, which obviously isn't his natural position, but he's proved that actually he can play up front, he can play in behind, he can play out wide, so he's a very adjustable player, and he can play in a numerous amount of positions. But it did seem to hinder it seemed to affect his play here, in the fact that he weren't really playing in his most comfortable role. We saw, against Liverpool, yes, he wasn't great when he came off the bench, but at least he gave us that sort of player in behind Benteke to at least, link up the midfield and the attack. But obviously here against Bournemouth, with us not having Benteke, he had to play out wide, and understandably, because he's out of position, he didn't really have as much influence as he would have liked. But towards the end of the game, obviously it looked like we sort of changed the formation a bit, where Wilf and Townsend were playing slightly more wide, and it was basically we were playing with no striker, but the likes of Wilf and Townsend would cut inside, and that obviously meant that Loftus-Cheek drifted down the middle, and actually that did make a telling difference, because as soon as he played more centrally, he had a bigger impact on the game, which is great, and it meant that we had a threat going forward. But like I've already mentioned at the beginning, even though he did have an impact going forward, he still lacked that sort of telling contribution and that telling end product as well. And obviously Hodgson, yes, we didn't really have that much option when obviously we had no striker, and I personally would have preferred to see Loftus-Cheek in a false 9 role. Obviously Hodgson opted for a 4-4-2 with 2 wingers up top, but personally for me, if Hodgson wants to get more out of Loftus-Cheek, he needs to play more centrally, because we've seen this season, and obviously where he's played in youth games with Chelsea, and when he's played for England, when he plays in behind the striker or as a false 9, he can actually be really effective. So obviously this week against Brighton, we've got games like Watford and Leicester City coming up. We need him to play centrally, because that's where we can get the most impact from him. So really for me, yes, he wasn't great against Bournemouth, but he wasn't exactly terrible. But if we do want to get the most out of him, and we want to make him have an impact, then of course we've got to play him more centrally. But Loftus-Cheek here, coming back from injury, obviously didn't make an impact against Liverpool, started the game here against Bournemouth, didn't necessarily make the impact that we would have liked, and obviously he's coming back from injury, so whether it's just a prolonged recovery from that, or whether it's just because he lost a bit of his technique from the injury, whatever it is, he didn't quite play to the standard we would have expected, but he certainly wasn't one of the worst players on the pitch and still had an impact for the team. So Loftus-Cheek here, I do think a 6 is a fair result. Now to move on to the forward, Andros Townsend, who I am going to give a 6. Playing in a more advanced role in the absence of Christian Benteke, and saw plenty of the ball, albeit without an end product at times. So Andros Townsend here, I've given him a 6, so much like what I briefly mentioned with Loftus-Cheek, in terms of us playing a 4-4-2 with Macarthur and Loftus-Cheek out wide, that obviously meant Townsend and Zaha were playing up front, and obviously that was in the absence of Christian Benteke. Now of course it isn't necessarily the best and ideal situation, having 2 wingers playing up top, but actually, much like we saw against Chelsea, where obviously we won that game, we didn't win this one here, but we did see in glimpses that actually, although it isn't perfect, it actually is quite an effective system. And you know, one of the things about it, and the main thing about Townsend's performance, is that in this system, rather than him playing out wide, he was playing more narrow, and that obviously meant he had plenty of the ball. So unlike in other games where he has to wait out wide to get the ball to cross it in, this time all of the balls were going to him, with him being the focal point, or him and Wilf being the focal point, which obviously meant that he saw quite a lot more of the ball, which was great. You know, he had more chances to score or create something from that having that possession. But albeit, yes, that's great, but he didn't have the end product at times. So although he had quite a lot of the ball, which is great, and one of the main reasons I've given him the 6 is the fact that he done quite a good thing with it, but he just didn't have that end product at times. So I talked about Macarthur. You know, Macarthur was running into the box, having loads of chances, and sort of ghosting into that area. Yes, he didn't score from any of them, but he did have chances. Whereas Townsend, he had lots of the ball again, but obviously didn't have that end product on times. But the thing that I really liked about his performance, and the main reason I've given him a 6, is that he played on the front foot, and that's something you want from a player. You know, if they're playing out of position, or they're playing in a system that they don't normally play, you obviously want them to do what they can. And I thought, you know, he played on the front foot, which is really great. And the main thing about that, which is great, is the fact that he puts pressure on the host. So he put quite a lot of pressure on the Bournemouth back four. And although we didn't have massive amounts of chances in the game, I do think that the partnership of Townsend and Zaha up front did cause quite a lot of problems for them up top. And you know, that obviously system I've already mentioned isn't really perfect, it isn't really ideal, but actually it did seem to pay off as the game went through, because it meant that we were able to win more possession, and we were able to win it higher up the pitch, because obviously the wingers normally, you know, you're normally chasing down the fullbacks, whereas this time the two wingers, fast physical wingers, are obviously playing more narrow, which means they're putting pressure on the back four, which obviously means that when we win possession, we're higher up the pitch, and obviously that gives us the best chance to go forth and, you know, create a chance from that. So personally for me, I think Townsend was quite instrumental in the way we played. You know, yes, he didn't score a goal like Wilf or Luka, but he still had an influence in terms of getting hold of the ball and trying to make things happen in the absence of Christian Benteke. And like I've said, it's not ideal, but he'd done his best. And you know, if he had a little bit more end product, it would have topped off his performance, because his performance was good. And if he just had that little bit of end product, I'm sure that he would have got something from this game, purely because of how well he was playing in a position which he normally isn't quite sure about. But the main thing really for me, the main reason I've given him a 6, is just the fact that he works hard, and he does this week in, week out. He's probably one of our most industrious players on the field. You know, I talked about Macarthur being industrious, but I'm sure if you look at the stats, Townsend probably runs even further than Macarthur, and that's obviously credit to him. You know, the fact that he's got the stamina to run throughout the whole game, but also the fact that he's able to chase down the opposition for the whole game and run as far as he does is obviously absolutely fantastic. So for me personally, yes, he obviously was playing in a more advanced role and didn't necessarily have that much impact in terms of scoring a goal, but I still think that if he had the end product, I'm sure he would have got a goal or an assist from the game, and certainly it would have been a reward for how well he played in terms of his pressure he put on the back four and in terms of winning possession. So personally for me, I do think a 6 is a fair result for him, and hopefully with Benteke and Soroff potentially returning for Brighton, hopefully us going back to a system with a striker will allow Townsend and Zaha to move back out wide, so we can get the best out of them. But Andros Townsend here, a 6 for him. Now to move on to our final player and striker, Wilfried Zaha, who I am going to give a 7. Quiet for large periods as it looked like it not be his day, but then he produced a moment of magic to put Palace back in front, with a sublime bit of skill and a shot which deflected past Begovic. So Wilfried Zaha here, I've given him a 7, and you know, it's quite debatable, because really if you look back at his performance, yes, he obviously scored a goal and he was quite influential in terms of in the build up to that goal. You could actually argue that actually because his game was so quiet, he probably deserves a 6, and if he hadn't have scored the goal, he probably would have got a 5, possibly a 6 for his performance, purely because he was quite poor in the game. And that's not because he was being bad, it was just that he was trying to do one trick too many, and just the fact that Bournemouth kept doubling up on him, which meant that he couldn't really have that much impact. And actually for quite large periods of the game it looked like it wouldn't be his day. But I've said this quite a lot this season, but when a player is playing bad and they're still able to score a goal of the quality of Zaha's, really just shows how good of a player he is, because you've got world-class players. Obviously I'm not saying Wilf is world-class, but he is a fantastic player. And when you've got a player who's having a bad game but can still produce the magic and still score a fantastic goal, that really just shows how good of a player he is. And you know, it was a moment of magic. It was just absolutely sublime skill to pick up the ball from Townsend. He he barged one defender, spanned past another, and then rifled the shot with his left foot into the net. That was absolutely fantastic, because like I've said already, we know that he's got skill, and at the beginning of the game when he was quiet, he was trying to do one trick too many and the ball was getting taken off him. But this in the build up to the goal, it was absolutely fantastic. He got it just right, and I was calling for him to be taken off because I thought he weren't really playing that well, and loads of people on Twitter were doing it. But thank God we didn't take him off, because we wouldn't have seen that bit of skill, getting past one defender, spinning past another, and then just rifling that shot into the top corner, or that into the corner, which was absolutely fantastic. And I know Begovic said that because it took a slight deflection, he probably was wrong-footed. I just think that even if Begovic wasn't wrong-footed, I still think Zaha would have scored, purely because of the power, the pace, and actually the fact that how far it was to the corner, which of course was great to see. Now, of course, in the last few performances, you know, he hasn't really looked up for it. He hasn't really been as good as he have liked to be. You know, against Liverpool, other than winning the penalty, he didn't really have that much influence in the game. You're looking at the Huddersfield game as well, didn't really have that much influence there. But this was a much better performance, which I suppose, with the running we've got now, with the important games coming up, is a positive thing to see. But like I've said already, you know, if he's not having a good game, he makes the difference up by using his skill and ability to beat his man. Which in the run up to this goal, we obviously beat two men by barging one and spinning past the other, which really just shows the quality he has. And like I've said already, you know, there's endless amounts of words to describe this goal. You know, I'm just going to use brilliant or sublime, because really it was just a fantastic goal to put us 2-1 up, and it was a goal worthy of winning any game. But unfortunately for Palace, much like has been the curse this season, we keep conceding late goals, and that ultimately meant that although we played well and we scored 2 fantastic goals, it meant nothing, because we went on to lose the game, or sorry, to draw the game 2-2. But I think that goal was worthy of winning any game, and if we had just brought on a defensive substitution, just held on for a little bit longer, then I suppose it would have been a fantastic point away from, or fantastic 3 points away from home, purely because both of the goals were fantastic. And it's just, once again, the game management, bringing someone on just to protect that lead, because if it had finished 2-1, it would have been a fair result, and it would have been a crucial extra 2 points for us. But I'm not going to complain too much about that, because I think before the game I was quite content with getting 1 point. We should have realistically got 2 if we held on to the game. Like I said already, 2 goals worthy of winning any game, but ultimately for us we didn't quite do that. But Wilfried Zaha here, you know, much like Townsend's performance in terms of, it's not really ideal with them playing up top, but he's still done a job, which is great to see. And like I said with Zaha, although he was quiet throughout the whole game, or for the majority of the game, it shows how good a player he is, that when they're having a quiet game, they can still have that one moment of magic where they go forth and score a goal, as good as Zaha's is. So Wilfried Zaha here, a 7 for him. A brilliant performance again compared to his last few games, and long may it continue. So as you already heard in that sort of summary I've just gave of Wilfried Zaha's performance, I did mention that obviously we didn't make any subs in the game. Now obviously I personally think that if we had brought on a sub, whether that was a defender or a defensive midfielder, or even just another attacker, just to give us a little bit more energy inside, rather than just, you know, letting the energy of Wilfried Zaha and Andros Townsend run out. Rather than doing that, we just stuck with the starting 11 we did. And obviously for us, that obviously resulted in us conceding a late goal, purely because if we had just, you know, shored up the defence, brung on a few defensive midfielders just to see out the game, then ultimately we would have gone on to hopefully get the 3 points. But like I've said already, you know, I do think it's a good point. You know, 1 point is better than no points. And against Bournemouth, who've been playing quite well this season, arguably it is a good point. But if you look at the context of the game, the fact that we gave away our lead twice, and the fact that we didn't hold on despite scoring 2 fantastic goals, that's obviously the thing that's quite gutting. And when you look back at both Bournemouth's games this season when we played against them, we've dropped 4 points against them. You know, the game at home, Benteke shouldn't have taken that penalty and he should have given it to Luka, and 9 times out of 10 Luka scores, so we should have given it to Luka. That would have been another 2 points for us, which would have seen us in a much more comfortable position now. And then obviously this game here, where if we hadn't have made that little defensive error at the end, and if we had just shored up the defence rather than just, you know, not changing the side and letting the players be tired and letting Bournemouth bring their subs on to change the game, if we hadn't have done that, if we had brought on sub, then of course they wouldn't have been able to do that. But if you look back at both games, arguably we should have won both games. And if you look back at it, it would have seen us relatively comfortable by now. You know, 4 extra points. I think we're on 31 now. So 35 points at this stage of the season is probably just enough to stay safe. So really, realistically, it's coming back to haunt us, the fact that we've missed chances in this game and we didn't bring on subs to make sure we could solidify that 2-1 lead. And also the game, obviously earlier on in the season, Benteke missed that penalty. If he hadn't have missed it and Luka had taken it instead and scored it, then of course we would have had extra points on the board. Now, of course, loads of people have criticised Roy for his lack of substitutions, and I do think it's very fair because I've criticised him quite a lot, and I think that actually if he had made substitutions, it would have made a difference from the game. To be honest, yes, it's acceptable to say that actually there's no real genuine options off the bench. You know, we haven't really got a striker, we haven't really got an attacking midfielder, so we haven't really got anything to bring off the bench to make an impact on the game. But when you think, even though we've got an injury crisis, we've got the likes of Jara Readable, Tim Fosu-Mensah, even Martin Kelly to an extent, you've got these players who you could bring off the bench just to see out the game, like what Sam Allardyce used to do, and that way, rather than us conceding in the last minute, we just park the bus for the final 4 or 5 minutes of the game by having another defensive midfielder there or another defender, and that way we basically park the bus, put a brick wall there, stop Bournemouth from scoring, and we make sure we can, you know, hold on to our lead. Because obviously if we can't see out a game, then we need to do something different, and normally you'd take or bring substitutes off the bench, and if that's not going to work, if we need to hold out a game, then I'd rather us play 5 at the back and play with 3 defensive midfielders if that's going to help us to hold on to the game, because I'd rather us not concede in the last minute because we don't make any substitutions, because there's not options. I'd rather us actually just bring on players and actually just park the bus to hold on to the game if, you know, Roy's not really happy with the options he's got off the bench. Because really, if you look at the substitutions, I was saying Wilf should have come off. Even if you bring Readwald on for Wilf, just to take a bit of control of the midfield, I'm sure that would have led to us not conceding that last goal, because I'm sure Readwald would have shored things up alongside Luka and basically would have helped us to, you know, go on and get that 2-1 win rather than conceding in the last minute of the game. But do comment below with your thoughts on that. But I do definitely think in this game, I'm not going to moan too much because a point is better than no points, and although we've dropped 2 points basically, you know, I'm not going to talk too much about that. But I do think if Roy had made a substitution sooner, that would have helped us to shore up the game. And I don't care whether we were playing 5, 6 at the back, do whatever we can to protect our lead and keep that lead, because ultimately it could have been an important 2 points. But the final point for me really is just that the next 5 games are massive. You know, you're looking at the table and the teams around us. We're playing all of them. So we're playing Brighton, Watford, Leicester, Stoke, West Brom. So these are really, really important games. And hopefully, if we can, you know, perform like we did against Bournemouth here, where we put in a good performance and we can learn how to hold on to a lead and not concede late in the game, and we can make substitutions, then hopefully that's to see us safe. But hopefully in the next few games we can continue with these good performances, because the next 5 games are massive. So I'm now going to move on to my Man of the Match award. But before I do that and give you my Man of the Match and who I thought the biggest influence in the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now, like I say every week, I obviously give a small summary of the game, but when you consider, you know, before the game you would have taken a draw, you know, 0-0 or 1-1 or 2-2, whatever the draw would be, before the game we would have taken it. But when you consider how good our performance was in terms of actually battling against Bournemouth, who of course have had a reasonably good season, so you can understand the frustrations when actually we play so well and we don't come away with anything other than 1 point. But when you look at the performance as a whole, there were certain players for me that really did stand out, and it was quite hard actually to pick 4 players for the nomination for the Man of the Match award, purely because with it being such a good performance, there were good performances from every player all across the pitch. So personally for me, even though we came into the game expecting a draw, that would have been fine. When you consider the context of the draw, the fact that we lost our lead twice in the game, when you consider the context of the actual draw, actually it seems like it's 2 points lost rather than the point gained, which we would have thought about at the beginning of the game. But in terms of the 4 players I've picked out, they are James Thompkins, Luka Milivojevic, James Macarthur and Wilfried Zaha. So once again, like I've said already, there are a few other players I could have put on this shortlist because I thought overall the team performance was alright. Not the best, but it was alright. But personally for me, these 4 players do stand out. Now in terms of Thompkins, he was probably the best defender on the pitch. Once again, like he has been recently, assured when he came back into the side. Defensively, he was assured, winning headers, putting blocks in, and like I always like from him, no nonsense defending, won't let any player get any space around him, makes a block, makes a tackle, and also, much like what Sacco brings to the side, he was also very composed on the ball. So James Thompkins, not only because of how good he was defensively, but also the fact that he can play the ball out of the back and he has that composure. So for them two things alone, so his ball playing and how solid he was defensively, that's why he's on the shortlist. Obviously, Luka Milivojevic, happy birthday to you. Your birthday was obviously on Saturday during the game, so happy birthday to you. But to be honest, it was his birthday, and he topped that off with a fantastic performance from him. And you probably heard in the player ratings me going over his performance. But the main reason I've put him on here is he scored one of our goals, which was a fantastically taken, scrumptious free kick, and that completely wrong-footed Begovic. He couldn't get there. Well, he almost did get there, but he couldn't quite stretch. So not only did he score that fantastic free kick, but he absolutely bossed and anchored that midfield perfectly. And that's the thing I like about his performance. You know, he's the guy who protects the space between the midfield and the defence, and here against Bournemouth he done a fantastic job in terms of giving that protection to the back four, making blocks, making tackles, absolutely bossing the midfield, but also he was that anchor point, so actually some of his passes were quite good as well. So personally for me, obviously it was his birthday, but he topped that off with another fantastic performance, and for me, probably the main reason why he's on the man of the match shortlist is because of that fantastic free kick he scored, which we've got to mention for a defensive midfielder, 10 goals in the season is fantastic, and you know, congratulations for him on that. But if you put the goal aside, which is one of the main reasons he's in this shortlist, actually his performance as a whole defensively, protecting the back four and passing the ball forward, was absolutely fantastic. James Macarthur obviously playing alongside Luka, I thought he was also very busy in the midfield like he always does, and actually when we were going forward he also offered us a threat. So not only was Macarthur doing a great job in terms of just being busy and you know, containing the back four, or you know, yeah, basically giving that protection to the back four. He wasn't only doing that, but he was also just being busy all over the field and actually offering a threat going forward as well. So that's something I like from him. You know, a box-to-box midfielder, you could say Macarthur, because he was forward at times, like when he had a shot which was blocked, and there was other times where he went back and done the defensive work. So the fact that he got that mixture right and was very good defensively and offensively is why he's on the shortlist. And obviously Wilfried Zaha, he was very quiet in this game, and if he hadn't have scored the goal, he'll be nowhere near the shortlist. But that goal with, you know, that sublime bit of skill to get past the defender, then he span past another defender, that was absolutely fantastic. So for the goal alone, that's why he's on the shortlist, much like Luka. But just the way he scored the goal as well, you know, the fact that he was able to get the shot away and just rifle it into that top corner with his left foot was absolutely fantastic. And, you know, I was probably calling for him, much like other people on Twitter, for him to go off because he was being very ineffective. But Zaha proved once again how good of a player he is, in the fact that even when he is having a bad game, he can still produce the magic. He can still produce that one moment of brilliance where he obviously scored the goal. So for me, the reason Zaha's on here is that although he had a bad game, he still had that moment of magic where he obviously scored the absolutely fantastic goal. And I must mention, you know, both Luka and Wilfried, both of their goals they scored were absolutely fantastic. You know, Luka's free kick, putting it into the corner away from Begovic, and obviously Zaha's one just rifling it and spinning past defenders. So both of them goals were fantastic and both worthy nominations for the Man of the Match award. Now, like I said every week, do comment below if you disagree with the 4 players I've put forward for the award, and also do comment below who you think deserves the award, whether you think Thompkins for his defensive performance, Milivojevic and Macarthur for winning that midfield battle, or whether you do think Zaha for scoring that goal does deserve to get your award. But personally for me, I think there's only one standout player, and that is the birthday boy off Saturday, Luka Milivojevic. So congratulations, Luka. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was another fantastic, solid performance from you. But the only reason I've given it to him, other than the other players, is purely because the goal he scored, which was absolutely fantastic, the fact that he captained the side really well, but the main thing for me really is just how much influence he had in the game. The fact that how good he was defensively, protecting the back four, how much that helped us in the game was fantastic, but also the fact that he sort of was that anchor in the midfield and helped to start attacks as well. So personally for me, Luka was by far the outstanding player, not only for his defensive contribution, but also his attacking contribution. Not only for his defensive, but also his attacking contribution, whether that be passing or the goal he did score. But, you know, like I say every week, special mentions must go to the other nominations in Thompkins, Macarthur and Zaha. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Luka Milivojevic and Ruben Loftus-Cheek following the game.
Luka, obviously everyone will be disappointed just because of the finish, but is it important to focus on the fact that it's a point away from home?
It's true. This point could be massive if we win next game against Brighton. We have to stay positive. We have to carry on, and as previous game, we can take many positive things from this game today.
It's an end-to-end game, lots of chances for both sides. What do you think made it such an open game?
Today we had a game where both teams wants to play. Both teams played football. We had our work. We tried to do what we want. On 1-0 we had 200% chances. We missed. After that we conceded, and again we come back, and 3 minutes until the end we concede the goal. Both, as you said, both teams play open football. It was nice game for the fans, but I more prefer on 2-1 to kill the game, to stop the counter-attacks, to kill the game in last 10 minutes and take 3 points. That was the most important for me, but we conceded, and I'm now very disappointed.
Another goal for you, a top scorer now, with free kicks. Seeing you practice them lots at the training ground, does it feel good for you to get one in the top corner?
I practice a lot, but every time, I would like to change my goal for 3 points. I would be very, very happy today if we won and I scored. That would be a perfect day for me, but now I'm not very happy.
Ruben, can we get your reaction to that game? Obviously, we know the players were disappointed.
Yeah, feels like a defeat, really, not to come away with the 3 points when 3 points was there for the taking. I thought we played really well in parts of the games, and they didn't really look like they could cause us that much danger throughout the game, and we had chances as well, which makes it even more disappointing to not come away with the 3 points.
You feel like at the point when Wilf scored, that was a story with the stick he'd been getting from the fans all game?
Yeah, I'm really happy when Wilf scored. That was it looked like it come off his other foot from my angle, but he said he caught it sweet. But yeah, 2 quality goals. I thought Luka's was top and Wilf's looked nice from my angle. So I'm really happy for Wilf, and at that point in the game, I thought if we can defend really well, keep our concentration, we come away with the 3 points. But another late goal, which is kind of reoccurring, so we need to keep our concentration.
And how did you feel out there? 90 minutes for you, and it was an end-to-end game as well.
Yeah, it was difficult, but I really enjoyed being back out on the pitch for 90 minutes and helping the team as much as I can get back in the swing of things and get as fit as possible, really. So I'm looking forward to the next game.
Do you think once the dust settles in a couple of days' time, when you got over the disappointment at the end of the game, it's a point away from home, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a point. As I said, it doesn't feel like it from the situation of the game, how well we played, and how the goals came about. But we'll dust ourselves off, and we can take positives from the game. How well we played, and take that into the next game, which is a massive game, obviously. So yeah, like I say, dust ourselves off and have a good week of training, and then get back into it.
Roy, can we get your reaction to your team's performance today?
Well, the performance was very good. My reaction to the result is, of course, less positive, because I thought that we played well enough to win the game and really should have won the game. So it's disappointing to leave 2 points behind here when really everything we did from the first whistle to the last probably meant that we should have been going back to Croydon with 3 points in the bag and a much better position in the table than we find ourselves in.
And it was 2 great goals, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2 very, very good goals and some very, very good football to create even further goal chances. And defensively, to be honest, they didn't create that many chances against us. It was mainly the corner kicks that we'd been dealing with extremely well until the last one in the last minutes of the game that we didn't deal with properly, and it cost us.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Luka Milivojevic and Ruben Loftus-Cheek had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Bournemouth. But make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Brighton. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.